paid for my family's European vacation, but they mocked my outfit choices the entire trip. At dinner one night, my cousin laughed, "You look like a tourist loser." So when they needed my card for extra hotel nights, I just smiled and said, "Good luck." I'm 38 female, the one who paid for a dream family vacation to Europe. My sister Jenna 35 female, my cousin Blaine 33 male, and my Aunt Margaret and Uncle Henry all came along. Instead of being grateful, they mocked me the whole time, especially about how I dressed. It built up day by day, until one night at dinner, Blaine outright laughed at me and said, "You look like a tourist loser." I didn't say anything then. But when they needed my card to pay for a hotel mistake, I smiled and said, "Good luck," and left them to figure it out. Now, I'm back home, they're furious, and I'm wondering if I was too petty or if this was a long time coming. After Mom and Dad passed away, family gatherings had started to thin out. Jenna had her own friends, Blaine was always off chasing some new business venture, and Aunt Margaret and Uncle Henry mostly kept to themselves unless they needed something. I missed the feeling of all of us being a family. When I got that unexpected work bonus, more than I'd ever received before, it felt like a sign. Flights. Hotels. Group tours. I told them they just needed to cover their food, souvenirs, and extras. I didn't expect parades in my honor or anything. Maybe just basic kindness. At first, they seemed excited. The group chat buzzed with plans. "We have to see Paris," Jenna typed one night. "And we should do Italy too," Blaine added. I spent hours organizing everything, choosing mid-range hotels in safe, central areas, booking early flights to save money, planning a little bit of everything, museums, sightseeing, downtime. I even built in free days where they could wander on their own if they wanted. But from the moment we met up at the Pittsburgh airport, the dynamic felt off. Jenna wrinkled her nose at my travel outfit, comfortable jeans, sneakers, and a hoodie. "Wow. You're really leaning into the American tourist thing, huh?" Blaine laughed, nudging Aunt Margaret. "At least she'll be easy to spot when we lose her." I smiled awkwardly, pretending I hadn't heard. Maybe it was just nerves, I told myself. We'd all be fine once we were actually there. Paris was gorgeous in May. The air smelled like fresh bread and flowers, every building was a postcard. I was bursting with excitement. But my family's energy felt wrong. On our first morning, I pulled on a sundress and flats for our walking tour. As we gathered in the hotel lobby, Blaine looked me up and down and said, "Are you going to hand out free maps or something?" The others laughed. At lunch, Aunt Margaret commented loudly about Americans with no fashion sense while staring pointedly at my crossbody bag. Jenna giggled, snapping pictures of my outfit and sending them somewhere, probably to her friends back home. It wasn't just clothes, either. If I mispronounced a French word, Jenna corrected me, wrong, but smugly. When I ordered something unfamiliar at a restaurant, Blaine made loud gagging sounds until people at other tables started to glance over. Small things. But small things pile up. I kept swallowing it. For days, I swallowed it. Rome was even worse. We visited the Colosseum, and while I was marveling at the structure, Jenna muttered, "Marlene's gonna need a walker if we keep moving at this pace." Blaine laughed so hard he dropped his sunglasses. Every photo they took of me was accidental, me with my mouth open, me adjusting my hat, me wiping sweat off my face. They had a running joke about making a tourist fail album when we got home. One afternoon, we were supposed to visit the Vatican together. I woke up feeling a little off, probably just exhausted from days of constant walking and bad sleep, but I pushed through. At the entrance, I stopped to grab a bottle of water from a vendor. When I turned around, they were gone. They had left me. I waited for an hour, texting and calling, no reply. Later, back at the hotel, Jenna shrugged. "You were slow. We figured you'd catch up." No apology. No concern. I sat on the edge of the bed that night, staring at my suitcase. My chest hurts. This was supposed to be our bonding trip. I had spent thousands, my savings, my time, my energy, and they couldn't even wait 5 minutes for me. Still, I tried again the next day. Because that's what you do, right? You don't give up on your family. By the time we got to Florence, my reserves were thin. I planned one special night, a beautiful dinner at a trattoria recommended by a friend who had studied abroad years ago. I made reservations, picked a place close enough that Margaret wouldn't complain about too much walking, even budgeted extra so we could order a bottle of wine. I even dressed up a little. I wore a long, flowing skirt and a white blouse, simple leather sandals. I pulled my hair back, put on a little mascara. For once, I wanted to feel like part of the scene, not like the punchline of a joke. As we sat down to eat, Blaine leaned back in his chair, looked me over once, and burst out laughing. "You look like a tourist loser," he said, loudly enough that the table behind us glanced over. Jenna choked on her wine, laughing so hard she had to wipe her eyes. Aunt Margaret made a weak attempt at shushing them, but she was smiling too. I smiled too. I smiled so wide my cheeks hurt. The conversation moved on, something about a famous statue nearby, but I had already moved into a different kind of calm. They finished dinner oblivious. When the check came, I paid, of course I did. But inside, I had made a decision. When we got back to the hotel that night, the clerk stopped us. There had been a mistake with the booking. Some kind of error meant we were short 3 nights. If we wanted to stay, we needed to pay up front, a big chunk of money, right away. Everyone turned to look at me. "Could you just put it on your card?" Jenna asked, like she was asking for a stick of gum. "Yeah, Marlene," Blaine said, "you're the one with the fancy job." I looked at the clerk. "Then my family." I smiled again, that same wide smile. "Good luck," I said softly. Then I turned and walked away. I could hear them calling after me as I walked to the elevator, but I didn't slow down. I didn't turn around. It wasn't anger pulsing through me, not exactly. It was something colder, steadier. A quiet click inside my chest, like a door I hadn't realized was open, finally swinging shut. When I got upstairs, I calmly packed my things. I had booked a small Airbnb across town on my phone while we were still at dinner. A single room above a bakery, clean and sunlit and, most importantly, mine. No shared hotel rooms. No snide comments at breakfast. No more pretending we were something we weren't. As I zipped my suitcase, my phone buzzed. "Jenna, are you serious right now? You're just leaving us?" "Blaine, real mature, Marlene." "Aunt Margaret, please come back down. Let's be reasonable." I didn't respond. I turned the volume all the way down, slipped my phone into my bag, and wheeled my suitcase quietly out of the hotel room. In the lobby, I passed them. They were still standing at the counter, bickering with the night clerk. Margaret was flapping a handful of credit cards at him like he could magically combine their limits into one. Blaine's face was flushed red, mouth tight with frustration. Jenna spotted me and started toward me, but I moved faster, slipping out the revolving door into the cool Florence night. I breathed for what felt like the first time in days. The Airbnb host, Matteo, was waiting for me when I arrived. He was kind, spoke broken English, and showed me around the little studio himself. The windows opened onto a narrow stone alleyway that smelled faintly of yeast and rosemary from the bakery below. It was perfect. The next morning, I woke to birdsong instead of Blaine's grumbling or Jenna's shrill voice. I got dressed in whatever I wanted without worrying about being mocked: soft linen pants, a simple tank top, comfortable sandals. Practical. Happy. For the next few days, I explored Florence like a real traveler, not a hostage. I wandered the Uffizi Gallery at my own pace, lingering for an entire hour in front of the Birth of Venus. I ate pistachio gelato from a paper cup, sitting on a crumbling stone bench while elderly Italians chatted around me. I climbed to Piazzale Michelangelo at sunset and watched the entire city blush gold and pink under the falling light. My family texted and called constantly. Jenna sent increasingly frantic messages. You can't just abandon us here. We're family. Marlene, grow up. This is beyond petty. Aunt Margaret's messages swung between guilt-tripping and demands. Blaine, predictably, alternated between mocking me and cursing me out. I didn't answer any of them. A small part of me, the old part, the obedient daughter, the peacemaker, whispered that maybe I should at least check in. Make sure they had somewhere to stay, that they hadn't ended up sleeping at the train station or something. But every time that urge rose, I remembered Blaine's laughing face, Jenna's smirk, the way Aunt Margaret had just watched it all happen like I was some stray dog that had wandered into their family photo. They had made their beds. Let them lie in them. From what little I pieced together later, and believe me, Jenna made sure to broadcast their hardships on social media, they managed. Barely. Jenna maxed out her already strained credit card. Blaine called home for a wire transfer, humiliating himself with some story about a travel emergency. Margaret somehow talked her way into a cheaper hotel across town, a dingy place with mold in the bathrooms, if the photos were to be believed. Meanwhile, I thrived. I spent an afternoon getting lost in the Boboli Gardens, laying in the grass and staring up at the brilliant blue sky through the leaves. I wandered side streets without a map, stumbling across tiny cafes where old men played cards and waved me inside like an old friend. I ate the best pasta of my life sitting on a cracked stone doorstep, laughing to myself over how different this trip had turned out from what I'd imagined. Freedom tasted a lot like lemon gelato. The funny thing was, once I stopped trying so hard, once I stopped performing the role of dutiful Marlene, the world opened up. Small kindnesses found me. A florist gave me a free sprig of lavender. A little boy shared his cookie with me on the train to Pisa. Matteo's sister invited me to a family dinner where nobody mocked what I wore or how I spoke, they just laughed and passed plates and poured wine and made me feel, for the first time in a long time, like I belonged. Back in the old hotel, my family's texts kept coming, but less often now. The messages lost their heat, replaced by cold little pings that read more like formal notices than family reaching out. Blaine, well, thanks for ruining the trip. Hope you're happy. Jenna, we're managing. Don't worry about us. Aunt Margaret, you've made your choice. I didn't reply to any of them. By then, I was sitting in a tiny piazza tucked behind a centuries-old church, sipping a cappuccino that cost less than a bottle of water back home. It was one of those little squares without a name in the guidebooks, with laundry strung between windows and stray cats weaving between the chairs. Around me, life continued at its own rhythm, old women carrying grocery bags, a man tuning a battered guitar, two little girls skipping rope while their mother called out from a balcony above. Nobody cared what I wore. Nobody laughed when I mispronounced a word. Nobody demanded anything from me. I hadn't realized how heavy carrying my family had been until I set them down. That afternoon, I decided to extend my stay. I still had a week before my return flight, and I saw no reason to spend it tiptoeing around people who treated me like a joke. With a few quick taps on my phone, I canceled the original return trip I'd booked for all of us, an earlier flight to Rome, 2 days wandering the city, then a group flight home. I booked my own solo ticket for 3 days later, giving myself extra time in Florence. Later, when Jenna discovered I wasn't coming with them to Rome and couldn't be their free travel guide anymore, she sent me a text so venomous it could have burned a hole in the screen. I didn't even open it. I archived the whole thread and turned my phone off. Let them figure out trains and hotels themselves. They were adults. They liked to remind me of that often enough, usually when I offered help they didn't want, or advice they'd ignore. Funny how quickly that independence vanished when it suited them. On my second night alone, I found myself wandering into a little wine bar on a side street. It was the kind of place I never would have suggested with my family, too rustic, too local, no English menu posted out front. I sat at the bar, ordered a glass of house red, and struck up a conversation with the woman next to me, Lucia, a retired schoolteacher from Siena. She spoke slow, careful English, and asked about my trip. I hesitated at first, not wanting to spill my sad little story, but something about her easy smile broke me open. I told her, not every ugly detail, but enough. About the jokes. The mockery. The final dinner. Lucia listened quietly, then reached out and squeezed my hand. In Italy, she said, smiling gently, family is important. But respect is more important. Blood is not an excuse to be cruel. I blinked hard, nodding. No one back home would have said it so simply. Later that night, walking back to my Airbnb under a velvet sky, I realized something. I hadn't felt lonely once since leaving them behind. Not once. I had been more lonely sitting at crowded dinner tables with them, being laughed at, dismissed, talked over, than I was now wandering foreign streets alone. There was something devastating and freeing about that realization. Like losing a limb you didn't know had been dragging you down. Meanwhile, bits and pieces of their struggle filtered through. Matteo's niece, who worked at the front desk of a nearby hotel, overheard a story about a very loud American family trying to negotiate rates at 3 different hotels in broken Italian. I didn't even have to ask. I knew it was them. I imagined Blaine haggling over €20, and Margaret waving her hands wildly, Jenna snapping photos for Instagram with some passive-aggressive caption about travel struggles. I felt no pity. Just an exhausted kind of detachment. They had mocked me for looking like a tourist, but here they were, loud, entitled, exactly the stereotype they thought they were above. I spent my last few days soaking up everything I could. I took a cooking class in a local woman's kitchen, learning to roll pasta by hand and laughing when my gnocchi came out lopsided. I wandered through open-air markets, buying tiny, inexpensive souvenirs, a hand-painted bookmark, a ceramic spoon rest, treasures that felt 1,000 times more meaningful than anything in the tourist shops. I mailed myself a postcard every day. Not to anyone else. Just to me. Each one carried a few lines. Today you walked 10 miles and smiled the whole way. Today you are the best pear you've ever tasted. Today you remembered how light you can feel without them. Each night, I wrote in a little notebook I had bought in Paris but hadn't used yet, scraps of thoughts, memories, flashes of color and sound. I wasn't sure why, at first. Maybe just to make sure I didn't forget how this freedom felt when the real world came calling again. By the time I packed my bags to finally leave, I felt lighter. Not healed, exactly. But less broken than when I had arrived. The flight home was uneventful. I tucked myself into a window seat with my book and a cappuccino from the airport cafe and didn't think about them once during the 10-hour ride. When I landed in Pittsburgh, my phone blew up within minutes of reconnecting to the network. Voicemails from Aunt Margaret, snarky text messages from Blaine, even a photo from Jenna, her scowling face at what I guessed was their cheap hotel in Rome, captioned, "Hope you're happy." I ignored them all. As I wheeled my luggage toward the airport exit, I spotted them gathered near baggage claim. Jenna saw me first. She stomped over, her heels clicking sharply on the linoleum. "You're unbelievable," she hissed. "You abandoned us." I kept walking. "Seriously, Marlene," Blaine called out, jogging to keep up, "what the hell was that?" "We're family." I stopped then, slowly turning to face them. Family. That word again, tossed around like a leash, a chain, an obligation. "You know," I said, keeping my voice calm, "family means showing up for each other. Not mocking. Not belittling. Not using someone until they break." Jenna scoffed, crossing her arms. "Oh please. You're being so dramatic." I smiled, not a friendly smile. A smile full of all the things I hadn't said for years. "You spent the entire trip treating me like garbage. Laughing at me. Leaving me behind. And now you're mad because I stopped letting you?" They stared at me, stunned. "You made your bed," I said. "Sleep in it." I didn't wait for their responses. I turned, walked out into the crisp Pittsburgh evening, and hailed a cab. On the drive home, my phone buzzed once more. A final text from Aunt Margaret, "You owe us an apology for your behavior." I laughed out loud. The driver glanced at me in the mirror, smiling politely. I just shook my head and looked out the window at the familiar streets sliding past. Once home, I blocked them all. Every number. Every email. Every social media account. It wasn't a dramatic, sweeping announcement. No furious text, no angry post. Just silence. The first few weeks were bliss. I went for long walks around my neighborhood without feeling my phone buzz every 5 minutes. I slept deeply for the first time in years. I reconnected with old friends, people who liked me, not just tolerated me. I even started attending a pottery class on Tuesday nights, something I'd wanted to do for years but always felt too busy for. Without their constant background noise, my life unfolded quietly, beautifully. Then came the final, sweetest twist of the blade, the revenge I hadn't even needed to plan. Turns out, during the trip, Blaine had racked up massive debt on a credit card he had opened secretly for travel emergencies. Without my wallet backing them, they had been forced into scrambling, and Blaine, always overconfident, had put most of the burden on himself. 2 months after we got back, word trickled through a mutual family acquaintance that Blaine had to move back in with Aunt Margaret and Uncle Henry. His car? Repossessed. His business ventures? Gone. As for Jenna, she'd posted a passive-aggressive GoFundMe campaign online, trying to crowdfund money to recover from a traumatic travel experience. It was mostly ignored, except for a few sarcastic comments from strangers asking if she thought being inconvenienced in Italy counted as trauma. I didn't have to lift a finger. They had ruined themselves, all without my help. Meanwhile, I booked a new trip for myself, solo, for the next spring. Portugal this time. I'd learned a lot in Florence about what traveling alone could feel like: liberating, peaceful, mine. As I finalized the plans, I received a letter in the mail. A real letter, handwritten. It was from Aunt Margaret. A rambling 3-page essay filled with half-hearted apologies, excuses, and thinly veiled guilt trips. In the middle, one line stood out, underlined twice: family forgives each other. I sat with the letter for a moment. Then, calmly, I fed it into the shredder. Family does forgive, when family deserves forgiveness. And sometimes, the healthiest thing you can do is walk away. No yelling. No dramatic confrontations. Just freedom. And that, to me, was the best revenge of all.